Hey guys. Okay, so right from the jump, the episode starts with a meeting between the Asakura family and the Tao family to discuss sharing information and for Mikihisa to train Ren in learning the secret techniques within the tome of the Shaman. And honestly, this is something I really like in comparison to the original anime, which is however small their overall role in the story still is. I like how the families of our main cast are playing a bigger role in addressing the threat of How, whereas in the original anime, they all had their initial introductions, but just kind of dropped off from the plot afterwards. The original anime basically treated the families of the main characters as as basically plot devices, and which really kind of sucks now that I look back on it. But with the only one who did have any relevance and lasting presence in the story afterwards was Mikihisa, and that's not even accounting for the parental introductions that still are to come. But yeah, it's one of those things where just looking at it objectively, I can even if they're even if the parents like pretty much don't, even if the parents, grandparents, all that, like even if they don't have as much of a larger role, it still is a more prominent and more effect and role that affects the story a little more, whereas before they were just kind of there. Um, that being said, however, with this episode having a focus on Mikihisa training Team Ren to harness the tome's power, obviously the big question is what I think of Mikihisa himself, because again, much more prominence with him. And honestly, my opinion of him hasn't changed all that much from my experiences of reading the manga. But because at the core of all my thoughts on the character, it all comes down to the most basic elements of which is the character introduction. To me how a character introduces themselves into the story will define a lot of my initial first impressions on the character going forward. And knowing that, I do think Nikihisa's character introduction was a lot stronger and had more weight in the original anime. But now, as far as characterization itself, that is where I do have to give a lot more credit to the manga and the reboot. Because for as much as I did like Mikihisa in the original anime, one thing I admit hasn't aged all that well about that version of the character is they really leaned into his much more jokey, sarcastic, and from just overall laissez-faire attitude, which definitely got more jarring as I got older. Whereas here, even though that side of Mikihisa is still a thing, it's balanced out with a much more like much more grizzled side to him as well. Like you can understand more that his lighthearted side is more of a mask to disguise the fact that this is a man whose core outlook has been defined by his very experiences and the frustration and the guilt he feels towards what happened that day. And in a lot of ways, Mikihisa also, through those experiences, Mikihisa in a lot of ways bears the mark of a veteran, someone who knows what true strength of a shaman is, how to bring that out in others, and how to make the people realize like things about themselves that they may not want to admit, which is not only the perfect opponent to make Ren accept just how outclassed he is currently against Hao and accepting that weakness to move forward, but just through the fight in itself between Mikihisa and Ren, you can tell that Mikihisa did in fact succeed in lighting a spark in Ren at least, and now it's just about like getting him to accept his weakness. But even more than that, even though he didn't necessarily play all that big a role until near the end of the episode, I also like how Mickey just watching the experience, just through watching just Ren and Mikihisa's fight, I like how Mikihisa also, whether indirectly or directly, managed to light a spark in Horo at the end of the episode. Like you can tell just watching that, it really invigorated Horo in a way where he's like, I don't care if I'm scared, I can't just watch from the sidelines anymore. So Yeah, I overall I just really love the effect that Mikihisa has on the character driven effect that Mikihisa has on in this version of the story compared to the original anime. Um, Also, one thing I really liked with this episode is that Ren kind of silently addresses a question I never thought about before, which is the reason why very little seems to actually phase Yo emotionally is because he's only one half of a single entity. Don't get me wrong, we've seen Yo get riled up before, but even then, but by the end of it, he always seems to bounce back pretty quickly. He never like lingers or holds on to onto any negative emotions. It's something I had never really thought about. Uh, I never really thought about until actually reading the manga, and to see Ren even silently bring up that possibility, it does bring a lot of Yo's character into more perspective and just make him a lot more of a tragic as a main character when considering that there are certain feelings he's unable to express as all those feelings probably lie within Hao, and makes the whole brotherly connection even more twisted, but even more so with Yo saying the quiet part out loud that Hao is so powerful that one way or another he will win this tournament is more than just words. Like, it's hard to talk about without getting into spoilers, but let's just say it's one of those things that makes Shaman King a particularly unique series compared to its contemporaries. Even more so than that, it just gives Yo like much more much more of a tragic a much more tragic perspective on Yo's character, and just he's basically a man who he's pretty much only half a person really when you get down to it. Um, with that said, though, we also learn that the two of the shaman fight officiates, Magna and Nikrom, are essentially how subordinates. And believe it or not, this is where we're getting into, I guess you could say, the real test of this reboot. Because while I understand the anime having to cut corners with certain aspects of the story, of the story in the beginning and whatnot, beyond this point is one area where they either can't afford to do that, or at best just trim the surface of certain scenes or moments. But they have to tackle this stuff full on without a lot of change now, because Nikrom, the thing is, Nikrom and his reason for joining Hao is not only much more fleshed. Nikrom as a character is not only fleshed out more here, but to give you an idea as to why he's betrayed the patch, well, and all that, all you'll need to understand there is in his name himself. Like just his name, Nikrom, basically gives the whole ghost away as to why he's part of Hao's group, why he's betrayed the patch, why he basically wants to pretty much destroy the world, pretty much along see Hao's vision become reality. Like these are, but. But overall, it's one of those things where I do like how the reboot so far is giving a lot more of these more secondary characters a little more of a role in the series by virtue of adapting the manga. And the other thing that has been interesting to me is looking at certain moments and scenes in isolation and seeing how those same scenes had played out in the original anime and what's different about those same scenes in the reboot. And because there's when you really look at a lot of these scenes now, like Mikihisa's introduction, for example, like Mikihisa's official introduction, it does kind of in some ways parallel the original anime, but when you look at his introduction here, there's a lot more visual storytelling going on when looking at what's different in these moments and whatnot. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, oh yeah, and before I forget, I do want to talk about Yo's mother, because one little passing comment that I think was made by Ren's grandfather is basically how she pretty much has the gall in order to how she's got guts in order to wander into the Tao sanctum or whatnot, or the Tao base. And it's like you can tell he's drawing a parallel between what Yo did and what she did. Like that's one thing you gotta admit. I guess share in common is that they pretty much got guts in order to storm into the Tau base. So yeah. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.